Yes, today we are doing William Makepeace Thackeray and George Eliot. William Makepeace Thackeray. His period was between 1811 and 1863. 1811 and 1863. Thackeray was born in 1811 at Calcutta, modern Kolkata, Calcutta, of Anglo-Indian parents. His parents were Anglo-Indians. Anglo-Indians means one of the parents belongs to England. Anglo-Indian parents. In boyhood, during his boyhood days or during his childhood days, he was sent to England to pursue his education, for his education. In his boyhood, he was sent to England for his education. He was educated at a Charter House School and Trinity College, Cambridge University. Trinity College under Cambridge University. So which were the schools and colleges he attended? He was educated at a Charter House School and a Trinity College under Cambridge University. He also studied at Middle Temple for law. He also pursued law. He studied his law at Middle Temple. And he went to Paris for studying art. And Paris for art. But he did not complete his degrees. That is a fact. He was never keen to an academic education. He did not want to confine himself within the four walls of a classroom and study. That means he was not an academician. He never wanted to be an academic fellow. That means he never was keen to pursue his academic education. He squandered much of his wealth for gambling. While he was in Paris and England, he squandered, he wasted. He spent lavishly. He wasted much of wealth, much of money for gambling. He visited Paris again in 1829. He had a great love for the city. He had a great love for the capital city of Paris. And in 1830, he traveled to Germany and met Goethe. In those days, in those Victorian periods, so many English authors had met Goethe in Germany. And he traveled to Germany and met Goethe. In the year 1836, he married the mentally unstable Isabella Shaw, who went completely insane later. In the year 1836, he married the mentally unstable, mentally not sound Isabella Shaw, and the marriage aggravated the mental disease. We can see that so many people having mental problems get married thinking that the marriage will cure their diseases. But actually, such a people with acute mental problems will only have their mental problems increased or enhanced with the marriage. They had better keep away from such marriages. So he married the mentally unstable Isabella Shaw, who went completely insane later. Thackeray returned to London in 1837, where his daughter Annie was born in June. In the year 1837, he returned to London. In the same year, the girl child daughter Annie was born to him. In 1840, in the year 1840, Harriet Marion, another girl child, Harriet Marion was born. The future wife, she became the future wife of Leslie Stephen, the father of Virginia Woolf. You know Virginia Woolf, one of the most important modernist authors of the 20th century. She was, of course, the pioneer of the stream of consciousness narrative technique. That Virginia Woolf. So that Virginia Woolf's mother was Harriet Marion. Thus, William Makepeace Thackeray became the grandfather of Virginia Woolf. Or in other words, we can say Virginia Woolf became the granddaughter of William Makepeace Thackeray. William Makepeace Thackeray turned to journalism and contributed both prose and light poems, soft poems to several periodicals, including Punch and Phrases magazine. In the Victorian period, in the 19th century, the two well-known magazines prevalent were Punch, P-U-N-C-H, Punch, and Phrases magazine, F-R-A-Z-E-R-S, Phrases magazine. So he contributed both prose and light verse to several periodicals, including Punch and Phrases magazine. Among his early works, the Book of Snobs is memorable. Among his early works, the Book of Snobs is highly memorable. It is a biting satire on snobbery which had assumed alarming proportions in the wake of the Industrial Revolution. The Book of Snobs. Snob means a person who practices snobbery. Snobbery means the practice of thinking high in the society, the practice of having a big superiority complex. They think that the whole world is in their pocket. Such a feeling is what is snobbery. So one who practices snobbery is known as a snob, S-N-O-B, snob. So among his early works, the Book of Snobs is memorable. It is highly unforgettable. It is a biting, it is a strong satire on snobbery which had taken alarming proportions, shocking proportions in the wake of, in the circumstance of the Industrial Revolution. During the period of Industrial Revolution, people became rich. So the society was divided into three stratas: the upper class, middle class, and lower class. And you know, the upper class and upper middle class people had this snobbish attitude. So this novel, the Book of Snobs, it is highly memorable because it contains biting satire on snobbery which had assumed alarming, shocking proportions, shocking measure in the wake of, in the circumstance of Industrial Revolution in England. To the novelist, to William Makepeace Thackeray, the evil of snobbery is a crime. He looked upon, he reckoned, or he considered the evil of snobbery as a crime, not an absurdity, not a foolishness. It is never the foolishness of people, it is just a crime. Being a snob, being snobbish is a crime. The evil of snobbery is a crime, not an absurdity. The History of Samuel Titchmarsh, another book, and the Great Hogarty Desmond. The History of Samuel Titchmarsh and the Great Hogarty Desmond, published in 1841, and Fitzboodle Papers. Fitzboodle Papers, 1842-43. It got published in the year 1843, and he started writing it in 1842. So 1842-43 are deeply marked with his biting humor. These two novels are deeply marked with his biting, strong, sharp humor, and merciless observation of human weakness. These novels mercilessly observe human weakness. They also reveal or unravel the human weakness. The Memoirs of Barry Lyndon. The Memoirs of Barry Lyndon, published in the year 1844. 1844 is a picaresque novel. The Memoir of Barry Lyndon is a picaresque novel. Thackeray's genius reaches the high water mark with the publication of the novel Vanity Fair for 1847-48. 1847-48. William Makepeace Thackeray's The Vanity Fair. published in 1847-1848. It was serialized monthly. So there was a practice of serializing in important magazines in those times. It satirized the class consciousness of early Victorian. The novel was a satire on the class consciousness. Class consciousness means the different strata in the society. The class consciousness of early Victorians. It satirizes class consciousness of early Victorians. It is concerned with Vanity Fair. The Vanity Fair is concerned with the adventures of Becky Sharp, the most important female character, Becky Sharp, a female adventuress with a few moral scruples. She doesn't have moral scruples. She is almost immoral. She is the most important character, Becky Sharp, a female adventuress with a few moral scruples, not a few moral scruples. The novel is remarkable for the wide panorama of life. The Vanity Fair is remarkable, it is notable for the wide panorama. It gives a panoramic view of life. It is remarkable for the wide panorama of life. It is a novel without a hero, there is no hero in it. The two major characters of the novel are Becky Sharp and Amelia Sedley, two friends. Becky Sharp and Amelia Sedley. Then Pendennis written between 1849 and 1850 is an autobiographical novel. It is autobiographical in nature. It is an autobiographical novel. In it he owes to Fielding. He imitates the style of Henry Fielding. In the novel, The History of Henry Esmond. In the writing of the novel, he owes to Henry Fielding, Pendennis. The History of Henry Esmond. There is another historical novel, The History of Henry Esmond, published in the year 1850. Is a historical novel of great length and complexity. It is a novel of great, immense length and complexity. It contains, so it constitutes a lot of complexity. So it is a novel of great length and complexity. In it, the novelist shows the minute and accurate knowledge of the times of Queen Anne in England. In the historical novel, The History of Henry Esmond, published in the year 1850, is a historical novel of great length and complexity. In it, the novelist shows minute and accurate knowledge of the times of Queen Anne. It is, of course, a classic. The New Game is a successor to Pendennis. Pendennis is the novel. Pendennis is followed by The New Game. The New Game, the novel, is of course a true successor to Pendennis. The Virginians. He wrote the novel between 1857 and 1859. The novel written between the period 1857 and 59. It is a sequel novel. It is a sequel to Henry Esmond. Actually, the Virginians can be labeled as a sequel to Henry Esmond. It describes the experiences of two lads, the grandson of Henry Esmond and himself. You know, the Virginians describes the experiences of two boys, two lads, the grandson of Henry Esmond and Henry Esmond himself. Thackeray's Lowell the Widower, published in the year 1860. The Adventures of Philip, published in 1861. And the unfinished work, the work which is left incomplete or unfinished, Dennis Duell, are inferior works. He also wrote a lot of charming, beautiful essays. He was also a writer of essays, and the collection of his essays is called The Roundabout Papers. The Roundabout Papers, published in the year 1860. Earlier, he wrote 3 famous travel books. He also has written famous travel books. They are the Paris Sketch, this Paris Sketchbook, the Paris Sketchbook, the Irish Sketchbook, and Notes of a Journey from Cornhill to Grand Cairo. Notes of a Journey from Cornhill to Grand Cairo. His last and the best of his 6 Christmas books is The Rose and the Ring. Rose and the Ring, published in the year 1855. In the year 1855, he has written 6 Christmas books, and the last and most prominent, the best among his 6 Christmas books is The Rose and the Ring. The Rose and the Ring, published in the year 1855. Thackeray died on the Christmas Eve, 1863. He died before the Christmas Day in the year 1863, leaving Denis Duval unfinished. As I told you earlier, the novel Denis Duval was left incomplete or unfinished by him. He was not able to complete the novel because before the completion of the novel he died. Then Thackeray is one of the greatest novelists of the world. Undoubtedly we can say that. Thackeray is one of the greatest novelists of the world. His works stand in sharp contrast to those of Dickens. His works are totally contrary to the works of Dickens. His novels stand in sharp contrast, just opposite with those of Dickens. He revived and innovated the Fielding type of novel. He was an admirer of the earlier novelist Henry Fielding, and he revived, perfected and innovated the Fielding type of novel. Thackeray's characterization is marvelously penetrative and truthful. How is his characterization? How does he depict his characters? Thackeray's characterization is marvelously, wonderfully penetrative and truthful, sincere. His characters are true to life. His characters seem to be real. His characters have the quality of appearing to be real. His characters are true to life. Thackeray's characters are universal types. When we examine his novels, we can see that his characters are universal types representing certain permanent traits. His characters represent or show or exhibit certain permanent traits or qualities common to all ages and countries. Actually, his novels are mirrors held up to human life because his characters are universal types representing certain permanent traits or qualities common to all ages, all periods and all countries. Irony is an important element in his satire. In his satire, an important characteristic or feature or element is irony. Unexpected things is an important element in his satire. Thackeray's style is effortless. His style is highly effortless. He does not seem to have an effort in writing his novels. His style is effortless. He writes like a cultivated gentleman. He writes like a cultivated, civilized, cultured gentleman, and his prose style is balanced, harmonious, and flexible, bendable. His prose style, his prose is balanced, harmonious and flexible. So this much about William Makepeace Thackeray, one of the most important novelist during the Victorian age. Now let us have a glance at the life and works of George Eliot or Mary Ann Evans. Her period is between 1819 and 1880. 1819 and 1880. In George Eliot's hands, novel became moral and philosophical. In the hands of George Eliot or Mary Ann Evans, the genre novel became moral and philosophical. Her chief gift is realism. One of the most important characteristics or features or gifts of her novel is realism, tempered with sympathy. Realism mixed with sympathy. Her chief gift is realism, tempered or mixed with sympathy. The novels are set in her family terrain. The novels are set in rural areas, family terrain. Terrain means stretch of land. Her novels are set in her family terrain. That is the old-fashioned provinces. Old-fashioned or uncivilized provinces. Provinces or the areas which are uncivilized, old-fashioned. That is the setting of her novel. That is the backdrop or background of her novels. Whose novels? George Eliot's novels. The novels are set in her family terrain, stretch of land, the old-fashioned provinces. George Eliot foregrounded, showed the importance. Foreground means show the importance. George Eliot foregrounded the facts that, she showed the importance of the facts that the lowliest, the humblest, the poorest, and the exalted. Exalted means the highest people. The lowliest people as well as the highest people. The humblest people as well as the noblest people. The lowliest and the exalted are subject to the same moral law. The same moral law is applicable to the rich and the poor alike, or the exalted and the lowliest alike. That was her philosophy. What is her philosophy? She foregrounded the facts that the lowliest and the exalted are subject to the same moral law. The choices in life are very much important. The choices in life are responsible for our happiness or misery. In a philosophic way, she points out that the selections that we make in our lives, the choices that we make in our lives, are responsible for our happiness or misery. Our happiness or misery have the roots in our selections, in our choices. The choices in life are responsible for our happiness and misery. The reward and punishment of one's action is inevitable, and we can never escape a reward or punishment in this world, in our mundane life. The reward or punishment of one's action is inevitable. Good action will be rewarded properly, and crimes will be punished properly. So the reward and punishment are inevitable, are indispensable. We cannot escape from the reward or punishment that God offers. Ask George Eliot, Mary Ann Evans. George Eliot has observed, as she has said, as George Eliot has said, her novels are psychological criticism. Using two words, she described her novels. According to George Eliot, her novels are psychological criticism. That is her observation. What is her observation? She observed that her novels are psychological criticism. They are, or in other words we can say, they are the insightful portrayals. The novels are the insightful or innate, inside portrayals or depictions. Her novels are the insightful portrayals of inner struggles, the struggles we have in our mind or conscience, inner struggles of her characters. How did she describe her novels? They are insightful portrayals, insightful depictions of the inner struggles of her characters. The novels are also a probe into the ways by which the characters brave moral dilemmas. When moral dilemmas appear before, how do their characters brave them? Brave means bravely face them, bravely face and surmount them. See, that is also a probe made by her novels. The novels are also a probe. Probe means search. Search. Her novels are also a probe into the ways by which, the methods by which, the ways by which the characters brave moral dilemmas. When moral dilemmas appear before them, how do the characters brave them, bravely face and surmount them, bravely face and overcome them? That is also a probe that she makes through her novels. Yes, about George Eliot. George Eliot is the pseudonym of Mary Ann Evans. It is the pen name or the other name of Mary Ann Evans. Her real name is Mary Ann Evans. For writing, she assumed the name George Eliot. She was born at Warwickshire. Where was she born? Mary Ann Evans was born at Warwickshire. Her house was at Falls Hill. Her house was at Falls Hill near Coventry. Her house was situated near Falls, F-O-L-E-S, Falls Hill near Coventry. Later, when she became grown up, she went to London. She was closely associated with reaching London. She was closely associated with, or she made friends with an amorous man, love-making, flirting man named Chapman. A sexually perversive man. What is his name? Chapman. She had a close association with the amorous, love-making, flirting Chapman. Chapman was the publisher of the magazine Westminster Review. Chapman was the publisher of the magazine titled Westminster Review. She became the assistant editor of Westminster Review. George Eliot became the assistant editor of the Westminster Review conducted by Chapman. She became the assistant editor of the magazine titled Westminster Review for 2 years, 1852 to 1854. For her services, she received no salary. For her services as the assistant editor, she received no salary. But she was given free board and lodging. She was given free boarding and lodging at Strand. Strand is a famous thoroughfare in Westminster. Thoroughfare, a highway. Thoroughfare means highway. Strand, a very fashionable thoroughfare or highway. Strand. So instead of her services, what she received from Chapman? She received only board and lodging at Strand, where Chapman conducted a curious boarding house, a very strange boarding house Chapman conducted, which was frequented by middle class intellectuals. In the boarding house conducted by Chapman, intellectuals visited. Intellectuals, what types of intellectuals? Middle class intellectuals frequented, means frequently visited the boarding house. Thus, George Eliot had an association with some of the intellectuals. Another important work of this time was a translation of Feuerbach's Essence of Christianity. Another important work of George Eliot during this period was the translation of Feuerbach's Essence of Christianity in 1854. By this time, she had met George Henry Lewis. By this time, there was a turning point in her life. She had met George Henry Lewis. She lived with him from 1853 until his death in 1878. Then she had a living together with the man. Without getting married, she lived with Henry Lewis, George Henry Lewis, for a long period from 1853 to 1878 until the man's death, George Henry Lewis's death. George Eliot has deep interest in writing. From when she was a schoolgirl, from when she was a school child, she had a deep interest or great interest in writing from when she was a school child. In the year 1857, 3 stories were serially published in Blackwood's Edinburgh magazine. You know, in the year 1857, 3 stories were serially published in Blackwood's Edinburgh magazine. The 3 stories are: number 1, The Sad Fortunes of Reverend Amos Barton. The Sad Fortunes of the Reverend Amos Barton. Second story is Mr. Gilfil's love story. And third story is Janet's Repentance. Next year, that is in 1858, they were collectively published in Scenes of Clerical Life. In the book Scenes of Clerical Life, all these 3 stories are collectively published. This was followed by the famous novel Adam Bede, published in the year 1859. Then the most important novel, The Mill on the Floss, published in 1860, and Silas Marner, published in 1861. These novels are called rustic novels. Rustic novels means the novels which had the background of rural life, rustic life. Among these 3, the most important is The Mill on the Floss. Which was published in the year 1860. Floss is the name of a river, and see, there is a mill named Dorcote Mill on the river Floss, run by Mr. Tulliver. And Tulliver had 2 children, Tom and Maggie. They are very much intimate. The sister and brother are very much intimate, very close. They are actually one soul and 2 bodies. That much closeness, that much affection was between the 2 siblings, Tom and Maggie, and Tom often calls her Maxie. Fondingly, Tom calls her Maxie, and Mr. Tulliver is in a lawsuit with Liar Wakeham. And later we find Tom is sent to Tulliver sends Tom to Mr. Telling's school for pursuing his studies. And once Maggie visits Tom at Mr. Telling's school, there she finds a hunchbacked boy named Philip Wakeham. Philip is the son of Wakeham, the enemy of Tulliver, Wakeham. Philip is, even though he is not so good looking, he is intelligent, he is a singer, he is a painter, he is such a prodigy. The boy is such a prodigy. Philip Wakeham. And naturally, Maggie falls in love with Philip. They have some closer relationship. And later Maggie returns, and by this time Wakeham wins the case, and the flour mill conducted by the flour mill, which is on the banks of the river flows, and the water of the river flows is used for the working of the mill, because there was no electricity. The novel was set during the 1820s. There was no electricity, so the water was used, the steam water collected and steam was used for the grinding of the corn grains. So Tulliver loses his youth, and Tulliver also sells his mill to Wakeham, and Tulliver happens to be the manager of the mill which he had sold to Wakeham. And one day they had a quarrel. During the quarrel, Mr. Tulliver has a stroke, and later she dies. In the meanwhile, Tom returns and he works hard to get money for supporting the family. And they move to Mrs. Tulliver's sister's house. And there is a Lucy. Lucy, who is the cousin of Tom and Maggie. Lucy is very pretty, and she is engaged to one Mr. Guest is her suitor. And on seeing Maggie, this Guest falls in love with her, and Maggie also some close connections with him. And one day both of them happen to travel by a boat, and storm is coming, and they are board on a ship. But in the morning, they do not have any physical contact in the morning. See, Maggie feels the prick of conscience, and she leaves the boat and comes back, but her family does not receive her. She goes and stays in her relative's house. Family does not conform to this immoral activity of Maggie. Maggie is actually innocent. What happened was she had an infatuation towards Mr. Guest, that is all. Mr. Guest is a very rich man. And later, Lucy meets Maggie, and Maggie reveals her innocence to her. And one night, there is heavy rain, and the river flows is flooding. The river flows has flooded. In order to save the life of Tom, Maggie voyages in a small boat. Maggie rows a small boat and comes to the rescue of Tom, and they decided to save the life of Lucy. But the boat capsizes, and both of them fall to the depth of the water, and both of them are, the brother and sister are dead. So the novel ends in such a tragic note. So this is Mill on the Flows. It was highly successful. It was a successful novel, and Adam Bede and Silas Marner were also successful. And Romola is a historical novel set in the 15th century Florence. Romola is a historical novel set in the 15th century Florence. It was serially published in the Cornhill magazine. As I told you, there was a practice of publishing every piece of writing serially in magazines. So Romola was also published serially in the Cornhill magazine. Next came Felix Holt, the Radical, in the year 1866. Felix Holt, the Radical, a social novel. It is a social novel about political disputes in a small English town at the time of the first Reform Act in 1832. So the novel Felix Holt, the Radical, which was published in the year 1866, it is a social novel set on the background of political disputes in a small English town at the time of the first Reform Act in 1832. Another novel by George Eliot is Middlemarch, written during the period between 1871-72. It is also a study of provincial life, rural life. It is set in a fictitious town of Middlemarch. The next novel is Daniel Doronda, Daniel Doronda, written between 1874 and 76. Then Impressions of Theophrastus Such. Impressions of Theophrastus Such, published in the year 1879, is her last published work. She also wrote some novellas. Novellas means small novels. Novellas and surprisingly amount of poetry. The Spanish Gypsy is a long poem which was published in the year 1864. The Spanish Gypsy is a poem. She was also a poetess. She also wrote a surprisingly large amount of poetry. The Spanish Gypsy is a long poem which was published in the year 1864. After the death of Lewis, George Henry Lewis, she married John Walter Cras. John Walter Cras, a man many years her junior. He was a man many years her junior. She married him in the year 1880. And in the same year, in December, she died. She died in December 1880. So after the death of the man with whom she lived for a long time, George Henry Lewis, she married John Walter Cras, a man many years her junior. In the year 1880, in the same year in December, she passed away.